This is JL's launch week. We are so proud to be here with her and with Karen McManus to celebrate this amazing book, Wings of Ebony. It is already climbing the charts. So as I was starting to say, my name is E.R. Anderson. I'm the executive director of Karis Circle. Karis Circle is the nonprofit programming arm of Karis Books. Karis Books is the South's oldest independent feminist bookstore. And we are here in partnership tonight with the Auburn Avenue Research Library. The Auburn Avenue Research Library on African American culture and history is an amazing partner. We have loved working with them throughout the pandemic. They are currently closed for browsing, but they are open online. And you'll see that our research librarian friend is going to be dropping links in the chat as we're talking. So what we want you to know is those links will stay up throughout the evening and they will stay in perpetuity at this URL. So you can come back, you can rewatch this event anytime you want, and you can look at these links again and again. So we want you to focus on the conversation and then revisit the links at the end of the night because they're really rich and they're going to enhance your thinking about these books and about this conversation. Because one of the things we really believe in is taking fiction and then learning more about where fiction comes from and the other influences that might have inspired the novels that we're hearing about tonight. So I'm going to introduce our two authors, and then I want to tell you about a special giveaway from the publisher. So first, I'm going to introduce Karen M. McManus. She is the #1 New York Times, USA Today, and international best-selling author of One of Us is Lying, Two Can Keep a Secret, One of Us is Next, and The Cousins. Her work has been translated into more than 40 languages worldwide. Karen lives in Massachusetts and holds a master's degree in journalism from Northeastern University, which she mostly uses to draft fake news stories for her novels. For more information, please visit KarenMcManus.com or writer KMC on Twitter and Instagram. So welcome, Karen. We're really glad you're here. And Karen has a book freshly out at the end of last year. So we'll be hyping that as well in the chat. And the person of the hour tonight is JL. JL was born in Houston, Texas, and is a first-generation college student with a bachelor's in journalism and master's in educational administration and human development. An advocate for marginalized voices in both publishing and her community, JL's passion for empowering youth dates back to her first career in education. She's worked as a preschool director, middle school teacher, and high school creative writing mentor. In her spare time, she volunteers at an alternative school, provides feedback for aspiring writers, loves on her three littles, and cooks up dishes true to her Texas and Louisiana roots. Wings of Ebony is her first novel. So we are so honored to be celebrating this with you tonight. We have already seen that your mother is in the house. So she shouted you out, wanted you to know that she's here cheering you on. And the last thing I'll say is to everybody watching at home, we are going to be choosing one lucky winner from everyone who registered tonight to receive a special prize pack from the publisher, which includes a gold cuff and an additional fun book swag pack. So if you don't know what the cuff is about, JL is going to explain about the cuff and everything, how it relates to the book. But by the end of tonight, you're going to want this cuff. So fingers crossed that you win it. I see many people already putting their questions in the chat. This is great. If you don't know, you can upvote a question. If you see one that is similar to what you'd like to ask, just click the upvote on the left. And at any time, you can click this teal button to buy Wings of Ebony from Karis Books and More. It really helps us when you buy the books from us, helps us stay afloat during this hard time. So I'm going to go ahead and get out of the way, and let's kick this off. Karen, thank you so much for being our moderator tonight.
Okay, well, I'm so excited to be here, and happy release week. I know it's been a little bit more than a week now, but let's just take a minute here. So this is day 9, maybe, of the book being out. Let's see. So far, we have Barnes & Noble Book Club pick. We have indie bestseller, and we have New York Times bestseller. So are you pinching yourself right now?
No, literally. Yesterday, I was literally like, maybe I'll wake up tomorrow and it will have been a dream. But I woke up today, and lo and behold, we're all still holding to this dream. So I'm going to stick with it until somebody wakes me up.
That's amazing. I mean, this is the kind of launch that you dream about as a writer. And it is so exciting to me to see this beautiful book getting its due because, you know, I loved it. And I'm so excited to talk to you about it.
Thank you so much. This is a dream, by the way, to be here, like talking to you. You are literally one of my favorite writers. And I love all.
God, thank you.
So I have to get my fangirling in there. I appreciate this so much. And I'm grateful that you took time to read and that you enjoyed it and were willing to come and celebrate with me. So
yeah, well, I got some questions for you. I'm definitely going to delve into the twisty side of things because that's, you know, what I love. But there is a lot to love. And first of all, can you just tell us what this book is about?
Sure. So here it is. And you all can see me okay, right? I'm not blurry. Wings of Ebony is a young adult fantasy about a Black teen from a poor neighborhood who must lean into her ancestors' magic to protect her community from drugs, violence, and crime. And that is sort of the spoiler-free version. But there's quite a few different things happening in the book that sort of all come to a head to accomplish said mission. So.
Yeah, well, there are it's a very thematically rich book. You tackle themes of racism and allyship, of power, of family, both found and biological. So what were some of your inspirations and what are you hoping that your readers, especially your young readers, take away from the book?
Yeah, so inspiration. I mean, I would say I was actively inspired by like Wakanda. That was a huge source of pride for me, like watching that movie. And Spider-Verse actually had the same impact. Like I just would get chills on my skin and like I would just watching that movie and being seen and sort of like depicted in such this like honoring, beautiful, exciting, powerful way was life-changing. And so it was like, I want to craft a book that's going to give that experience to readers. So it was important for me to make something that was just full of pride. And then I thought about like fierceness and I sort of all of my favorite like fierce heroines, because I knew I was writing in a fantasy space. So I wanted to have, you know, like a fierce protagonist. And I really loved Wonder Woman. I haven't seen 1984. So like the other one, I think it came out in 2012. Yeah. But like, that movie, like I could watch it a million times. Like I absolutely love just like the feminist bent and just like how powerful Diana is and just, you know, all of that. And so I wanted teens that identify with Rue to pick up this book, and I wanted them to like see themselves and like think they can do the spells and like think they can do the magic flips and like think that they can fight. And so I wanted to like create something that felt sort of out of this world, but grounded enough in a contemporary setting to like almost be believable. And then I would say thematically, I was really inspired by, I wouldn't say consciously inspired, because I realized as I was drafting this book that I was really processing a lot of grief over the brutality on our community and just like all of the Black kids that have been killed and murdered and just gone missing. And I realized that sort of that grief bubbled to the surface when Rue, the main character of this book, came to me. And it wasn't even a conscious thing. You know, writing is such a place of processing for me. So as I began to explore Rue, I realized that she was a lot of me. She was grappling with things that I had buried beneath the surface or hadn't fully processed or sat with. And so it was just sort of this combination of like, I'm going to take this very real grief and these very serious issues, and I'm going to put them into a story that subverts them and gives the power back to the community that is being harassed and killed and brutalized and murdered. And so that was sort of the mission that I was trying to accomplish when I wrote it.
And she did, and she takes that power back, which is such a great journey for her. But it is a journey, right? You know, she doesn't start out powerful. She says, I make a way out of no way, which I love about her. She's just very determined. Even when she doesn't know the right way forward, she keeps moving forward. And that makes for a great protagonist, you know, because she's active. So I really appreciated that about her from a craft point of view. And I wanted to ask you, when you're thinking of Rue and the journey she's going to go on, you know, what did you see as driving her, and what did you want her to kind of like learn and develop over time? Again, not too many spoilers, because obviously if we talk too much about what she learns, we give things away. But, you know, what were you hoping to accomplish with her arc?
You know, I really wanted Rue to be able to understand a few things. I wanted her to understand that, one, the world does not sit on her shoulders and hers alone, which I feel like a lot of kids from my community, my young sisters, young me, adult me, feel this, you know, this sort of sense of obligation and just like responsibility to protect our own. And I love that about Rue. But I also wanted her to understand, and I try to weave this in through like subplots, but like that she also can just be like a teen girl too, you know? And so that was definitely part of it. And then also I wanted her to realize what she was capable of. I think that that is sort of the message that I'm always like browbeating over I have a 14 and 15-year-old sister, right? So I'm like, you know, constantly talking to them about that. And I think, you know, the way I used to be a teacher, and so I think the way that kids process things isn't one, they are processing things and they are paying attention, but two, it isn't necessarily a conscious processing, or they're not necessarily processing it the way we do, adults do.
Yeah.
I wanted to give them literature to explore this idea of like, do I fully realize and grasp just what I'm capable of?
Yeah.
Do I, especially for Black kids, like, do I see a connection between me and Barack Obama, between me and John Lewis? Like, do I really grasp that? Or do I sort of sit in this place where I see sort of the Beyoncés and the John Lewises and the Kamala Harris? Do I see that as them, or do I see that as like a collective we? And am I inspired by that? So I wanted Rue to really kind of dig internally to figure out, you know, who is she really and what can she really accomplish? So that's
I love what you say, that the world doesn't rest on her shoulders. And one of the ways I felt like that came out really beautifully was in her relationship with Bree. You know, and Bree is like a good friend, she is, but she's also someone who benefits from the system that they're in that is not fair to everyone. And she doesn't know that initially, but then she learns it. And there's just a great moment where Rue is, you know, she's sharing information, and Bree, she's like at that stage where she feels like, can I kind of just make everything work out and we could keep some of the things I like? And, you know, she's just not being helpful. And Rue just kind of is ready to like give all the information she has. But then she's like, this is like your journey to now figure out what I do with this. And I thought that was a really great thing for kids to see, you know, that you can be friends, you can love your friend, you can tell your friend, you know, what she needs to know, but ultimately your friend has got to make her choices
and do the work. Like it's and I think that that's one of my favorite parts in the book. And I always get a lot of people that tell me that moment gives them pause. No matter what sort of reader they are, whether they're a fantasy lover, contemporary lover, regardless of their race or ethnicity, like that particular scene always gives people pause. And I love that.
Good.
I wanted it to be a conversation starter, because if we look at the world and like what we came through in 2020, like these things are at the very least on the peripheral of kids' minds. And I think it's very important, especially like when my teacher hat slips on unintentionally, that people are having, or teachers especially, feel equipped to have these conversations with kids, and like to allow them to explore these dynamics through literature, I think is just so powerful and so equipping, because the book is told from Rue's perspective. So you sort of are walking in the shoes of someone that you may not necessarily identify with, but then you also grow to love Bree too. Like, I mean, Bree, I wrote her very intentionally, obviously, and she just has a very special place in my heart because of how much she loves Rue, and because of how much Rue loves her, and how that doesn't mean that their friendship is perfect.
Right.
So I'm hoping that that's helpful to kids.
A really healthy thing for kids to see. And it was really well done.
Thank you.
So let's talk a little bit about world building. So I don't know if you know this, but I attempted to write fantasy before I wrote thrillers. Yeah, my first two very unpublished books were actually contemporary fantasy. And what I learned about myself was that that is not a strength of mine. Like creating magic systems is not a strength of mine. So tell me about how you went about creating these two worlds that, sort of parallel one another, contrast with one another. One has magic, one doesn't. How do you balance that?
It was a learning experience because, to be transparent, in a lot of ways, I cut my teeth on this book. Excuse me. And I'm thinking 19 drafts to get this where I needed it to be. But it was a growth experience because I wasn't entirely sure the entire time what I was doing, but it was a lot of experimenting. And I wanted to try to I wanted the world to be familiar enough to ground my contemporary readers, but strange enough to engage my fantasy readers.
Yeah.
So I really looked at like creating power on the page and magic, and really using a lot of metaphors with the way magic works in the world and how it represents power. Very much a learning experience. But book 2 is a lot more magical because it takes place all in Gazan.
Oh, it does. Okay. That's something to look forward to. Good. Yeah. Well, I love the world and I love the magic system, and I love the use of, there's certain artifacts that are meaningful and also have powers. And it was just really interesting how you pulled all that together. So let's talk a little bit about the twistier side of things, which of course is what I always love. So this is a fantasy. Oh, thank you. This is a fantasy, but it's also a mystery. There's a couple things that we don't understand about Ruth's family, about the world, about how the societies, kind of like fit together in certain ways. So I always love to hear from people who write twisty things, how you approach that, how do you approach building suspense? How do you kind of like time your reveals and feed people's information? And are you trying to, misdirect? Are you, really building towards a certain thing? What's your strategy for shocking your readers?
Well, I feel like I should be taking notes from you on this. I'll add my little 2 cents. I really wanted to immerse readers first and foremost. Like I knew, my book has deeper themes and like heavier themes, but I really wanted to engage readers first and foremost in a thrilling, fast-paced plot. Like thrillers are candy to me. They're my favorite genre to read. I don't know if you knew that, but like even more than fantasy, like thrillers are my go-to. When I'm in a reading slump, I always grab a thriller. Like they're my favorite. And so I knew I wanted the pace of my books to be that sort of, oh my goodness, what's going to happen? So I wanted
the pace is breakneck. It is like bam, which I love.
So, and I also think in fantasy books, right, as an aside, like sometimes that's a challenge. And so I knew trying to pull on a contemporary audience that I didn't want there to be too much like fantastical world building up front. So again, back to the magic, I wanted it very grounded so they could sort of dive in. Chapter endings are sort of my favorite thing ever. I mentor you, and you're so good at them. I mentor a lot of writers, and one of the things that I talk to them about is like when, and this isn't right for every novel, right? But to a degree, when you get to the end of the page, like why does your reader have to turn the page right now versus like them putting it down? I heard something once that, and I can't remember where I heard this or if it's even true, but Stephen King apparently, this is what I heard, again, maybe not true. Stephen King apparently, like when he lets his partner read his books, he will like watch when she puts it down and like take note of that. And I'm like, that is so, because you can tell when a person is like reading and they're like, they won't let you go. Like you're like, I can't, I have to keep turning. And so what I try to do is I try to play with that, especially in the first half of the book, where I'm telling you just enough and I'm engaging you just enough at the end of the chapter where you're sort of like bait and hooked. The very end of the chapter where there's a question, a burning question or a thing you need to know or something you're on the cusp of finding out. And then I end the scene to force you to start a new chapter, because I feel like most readers don't like stopping in the middle of the chapter. So I try to use that strategically. And then as we get into the middle of the book, I try to, you know, stretch out things some. I also play with the length of chapters. There are some pretty short ones in there, like some of the flashback scenes, which is really intentional to keep, like, to balance, like, here's a bunch of world building, but here's like a short little flashback that's like going to amp up the mystery and the pace and hopefully keep the heart racing until the end. So, I mean, I literally study your books because you are author. So I'm learning, and writing this sort of suspenseful tone of a story is like my favorite thing ever. So that's something that I intend to do in all of my YA books.
Well, I feel like we probably are working to engage a lot of similar readers, you know, and some of my readers are reluctant readers. You know, they say that they don't like to read, but they like my books, which is the best compliment I can get. And I use that strategy as well. I'm like, okay, you know, short chapters, punchy, lots of things are happening. I'm going to answer a question, but I'm going to raise a new one. And if you can stop turning pages at the end of this chapter, I have not done my job. You know, so it's like being relentless about always leaving that reader wanting more.
Yes, I love it. I love it. You do it so well. I can't wait
to find out what's
next from Karen.
So another thing I noticed about this book is a lot of times, for me at least, it was you went the unexpected route with things. And again, I don't want to be spoilery, but there's one scene where Rue is kind of like she's witnessing something that she's not supposed to see. And it's a very dramatic moment. And I thought as I was reading this, I was like, oh, I know what's going to happen. She's going to do X. And that's not at all what happened. So, and it was great. You know, it really was an important moment for her as a character and important for the story. So are you a plotter or a pantser with this kind of stuff? Do you know going into it what you're going to put your characters through? Or do they take you places you don't expect? Do you surprise yourself?
Oh, most definitely. Like, I would say in my head, I'm a strict outliner now. Granted, I will say my process has evolved a little bit since I wrote this, because I started writing this book in 2018. And I think then I had a loose idea of what the story was going to be about, but I was a heavier pantser. I have become an outliner.
Me too.
And still, my characters still take over. And sometimes in a scene, you know, like you think you know the way it's going to go, but then you're in that moment, like immersed in the tension, and you're like, but what if this happened? Like they would never see that coming. And I think it's
I did not see it coming.
Well, that's great. That's a huge compliment. Because I truly think that those moments where you write your reader into being sure and comfortable, and then you sort of twist things, you sort of almost like yank them deeper into the book. Because they're like, wait a minute, I thought I had my bearings, and now I really don't know what's happening. So
have you come to appreciate the outline as you move along in your writing career?
What I find is that I actually like plan an outline, and then I write it, and then I end up revising my outline. Like mid-draft or mid-revision, I will go in and like re-outline a section of chapters, and then that'll give me sort of direction. I used to be able to just like start typing. I can't do that anymore. Like that lack of direction stresses me out. It did not used to, but it does now. I need to know what I'm trying to accomplish at the very least. So
yeah, I'm very similar. I do a big broad headline, and then I start to write and the outline, and the outline always changes as you go, because as you write, you learn more about your characters. You know, things fill themselves in. At least it feels like that sometimes. It's almost magical. And then you've got to go back to that outline and figure, okay, now what?
Yes, exactly. And I think there's something to be said, especially if there are writers here, that like, if you are, so one of my CPs, brilliant CP, is a hardcore outliner. She actually might be here in the chat. And I think there's a beauty to allowing yourself to be so immersed in the story that even if you are a rigid outliner, you let yourself have those moments of pants. Like, I think, honestly, being both is incredibly great to have, because I think they both serve different skills, because you do want to kind of get lost in your own story a little bit and kind of see where it takes you.
I know I have one mystery writing friend who does not know the end when she starts her mysteries. And this is so astonishing to me. Like, I could not do that, but it works. It works for her. So that's the other thing, whatever works for you, you do that.
Absolutely. Make magic however you can make it.
Yeah. So I know we have a lot of questions, but I have a couple more and then we can start taking them. So I just want to talk a little bit about relationships because those are very important in this book. All different types, you've got families, you've got love interests, you've got friends. So what did you want Rue to sort of take from those relationships? And were some of them holding her back? Were some of them moving her forward? What was exciting for you to write all those different types of love that she has and those different types of connections?
So there's sort of a layered answer for that. So a lot of the love in the book is for the reader. A lot of the love serves Rue, but a lot of it, because to a degree, this book is sort of a mirror and a window into my community. And Eastro is very much like my home where I grew up. And so it was very important for me to world build it and immerse readers in this experience of love and joy and togetherness that just is where I grew up, because the narrative so often in the media or in other, books or forms of entertainment doesn't show that. It doesn't depict that so powerfully. So part of it was intentional for the reader to experience and understand Eastro. Eastro, to a degree, is almost like a side character.
Very much.
I wanted the reader to love that side character and see that side character in a way they haven't seen that side character before. For Rue, I think part of her arc was understanding the role her relationships, again, spoiler free, right? The role her relationships with people, how that impacted her. So her mother, who, this is not a spoiler because I think it's on the jacket, I'm pretty sure, but her mother was murdered almost in front of her. She almost saw the entire thing. And that relationship and the one with her sister are sort of what fortify her. But there are other relationships in her life that she doesn't fully understand the role that they play, both good and bad. And I think her doing the work, which is so hard, right? This is, the more I think about it, I'm a mom. So I'm these poor children, more of them, I'm asking her to fully face her grief, all of it. And I'll keep that just there, face all of the grief in her life and really work through it. And that's a hard thing. But I wanted to show sort of the power of love in the face of all that, because I do think that love is literal magic. It is incredibly powerful and healing. And I just think that love just can do a lot. And I hope that, the future change makers of the world, these teen readers of mine, are reading this book and really, if they take away nothing else, they take away sort of the transformative power of love, and that inspires the way that they engage with the world. I mean, just imagine if that is what people had on the forefront of their minds when they decided to be a citizen of this community. So I think love was a big piece for many reasons.
Well, I have a special place in my heart for sister relationships. I'm very close to my sister and I love to write sisters, and I love the sister relationship in this book. It reminded me, it had little shades of Hunger Games for me, and just how protective she is. It's a younger sister situation, how protective, how loving, but also how, you kind of have to give that sister a chance to grow up a little bit too. That's part of their dynamic also, which is something I kind of put into One of Us is Lying as well when I was writing that. You've got a very protective older sister who thinks, she's always got to look out, and eventually realizes, she can do some stuff. So that was really fun to read.
That was a part of the book, without spoiling it, Tasha's arc. That was a part of the book that Tasha showed me that while I was writing. That was a moment that came to me in pantsing that was not in the outline. And I just realized in that particular scene where her arc sort of comes together, I was well, in my head, the Tasha in my head was hey, I have something to say. And I was okay, Tasha, what do you have to say? So I just let her take the lead. So, yeah.
I love that. So let's just talk a little bit before we get to the questions about your writing journey, because one of the things I love about your story is that you were part of DV Pit, which, for anyone who's not familiar, online Twitter pitch contest where you basically pitch your book in, a tweet. And I love these contests, and every time they happen, there's like one tweet that takes off and like everybody loves it. And everyone's like, this needs to be a book. And that was you. So that was pretty amazing. What was that like to kind of just get that instant connection to the story you're trying to tell?
It was wild. Like, I cannot even put into words how it shocked me. I will never forget. I was in California at the time, and I set an alarm because the contest starts at 8 a.m. Eastern. So I set an alarm at 4:58 a.m.
Oh my God.
I shared my tweets, and I'll never forget like telling my partner, like, okay, I don't want to obsess about Twitter all day in case I get no likes. So I'm going to post my tweet, and I'm just going to go back to bed. Like,
just
the kids don't wake for a while. Like, it's going to be fine. I posted my tweet, Karen. I was looking at my phone for like 12 hours straight. Like, I was like, another like, another retweet, comments. And I was like, oh, thank you for sharing. And then someone else was like, oh my goodness, thank you. And next thing you know, I was like, literally jaw on the floor. And then my friends who had like, you know, critiqued the story, they were like, oh my goodness, it's resonating. People like it. And like, it just blew me away. Like, I could not expect, I had hoped and I had dreamed, but I did not expect that in any way. And it was, I would say that has characterized my entire journey. Did I expect yesterday for Rue to, because I see this as such a victory for Rue, the character, and all she represents, and down to like the hoodie on the cover, like the Black Girl Magic, the inner city community, the fact that she just has so much emotion and anger and rage. Like, I've never seen a Black girl in a story be able to be so unapologetic in the way that Rue is, and like make the list. Like, it just in an inner city fantasy novel, like it just again, the whole journey from Div Pit to yesterday the theme has been wait what? Like, wait what? That's the whole thing.
I think it just goes to show, you know, like her voice and your voice, it's clear as a bell, you know, and it just like rings through, and that's, I think, what people respond to. So this is exciting to see, and let's see what some folks are asking. Oh, this is a good question. Your marketing strategy has been a thing of beauty to watch, which I agree with. How much time would you say you have dedicated to marketing? And is that independent perhaps of what your publishing team has done?
So Simon, I will say that Simon & Schuster, from about 5 months out, sat down with me, gave me access to, and when I say sat down with me, it was like the VPs of all the things. There were people with like blazers, like it was just, I was like, oh goodness, I should have dressed up. Like, it was basically a moment where they were saying, hey, we're in this with you. What do you need from us? And so they really, really rode hard for my book. I say ride or die all the time, or Bree says ride or death because she just can't get it right. But my publisher, love me some Bree. My publisher rode with me. I think, you know, it was a mix of me telling my publisher what I really wanted, and them saying, okay, like we're gonna do this with you. And there were very few things that I asked for that they didn't try to do in some way. And I think that, combined with the writing community, has just been very supportive. Like, I just feel like I showed up one day and was like, hi, I want to write a book. I'm new here. And they just like wrapped their arms around me. We're like, okay, we'll show you everything. Do you know what Save the Cat is? I was like, I don't have a cat. I don't understand. And so like literally I learned everything from Twitter, Karen. I mean, I do have
me too.
Yes, isn't that fascinating? Like, I have a degree in journalism, so there's a lot of that training, which, yes, you know, but I would say the meat of like composing a story, Twitter.
Yeah.
And so a lot of it has been Twitter, like really coming to bat for Rue. I remember opening applications for a street team and getting hundreds of applications. And I cannot tell you how much my street team has done. My street team has been my rock through all of this. Like, even just a place of solace. Like, after a long day of pub work or writing guest blog posts or revising, we have a Slack group, and it's not even like, you know, street team related, but we'll just go in there and we'll chat about the day. getting through 2020, like a lot of that we did together, even if we're just talking about books we're currently reading. And I think that creating that community around just fellow writers, like it was so authentic and rich and pure that like when it came time to like promoting Wings, they were just so excited to promote like my book, because like we have this established relationship, and it's like, you know, there's sort of this joint ownership of each other's success, you know, like we want to see each other win. And so I think combination of my publisher really, really like opening the doors wide open and saying, what do you need from us? The writing community and my street team going to bat. And then I'm very like Rue, right? It's like, make a way. You know, I have no control over a lot in this industry, but I can control my work ethic. And so I said, I'm going to do my best to give Rue her best chance, because ultimately, I really believed if I could make readers believe that they're unstoppable, if Rue could make readers believe they're unstoppable, she could change the world. And so I'm like, okay, mission, get book into kids' hands. How do we do that? And so like 4 weeks leading up to release, I started organizing a donation drive in my neighborhood to make sure that the kids who grew up where I grew up, where my sisters live, where my family went to high school, like make sure that they get this book, because if I wrote it for anybody, I wrote it for them. So I think it was just a combination of all kinds of just people being passionate about what the book could do, what it could mean, how important it was. And then I just think it was just giving it my all. And
you just working, you know, you were.
I did my best.
Hard worker. And you also, I think, you know, you probably won't pat yourself on the back, but I will. You're one of the most supportive people in the writing community. You show up for everybody, you know, and so I think it's not hard for people to show up for you, because you've been doing that since you got there. So it's good to see.
I feel like they've taken me under their arm. Like I truly feel like this is like, we're in this together, you know? And it's just so inspiring. I'll never forget joining Twitter and like seeing Book Deals post, and I didn't even understand how to write a scene. And I was just like, wow, that's so amazing. And people would just rally around and support them and like put the like bug eyes emoji in the comments when people had news. And like, it just felt like the togetherness. I mean, community is so important, as you can tell from reading Wings of Ebony.
Yeah.
And so I just, I want to see us all win. I want to see us all win.
Awesome. A good question. Someone has a question that would like to hear both of our specifically mystery-based writing / plotting strategies. And I will let you go first.
Okay. I'm not as rehearsed in this as Queen Karen, but I try to start with the end in mind and sort of backwards plan. I used to be a teacher, and so when I would lesson plan, I would plan backwards. I'm still kind of studying the craft of writing mystery. I think, you know, we're our hardest critics, right? So I'm always looking at ways to grow in that area. But right now I start with the end in mind, and then I sort of like try to bait out when are my big reveals and like strategically place them with where I want the tension to land in the story. That's probably my strategy. But again, I'm learning. So Karen, share your wisdom. I will get my note-taking pad.
Well, you mentioned Save the Cat. Do you use a beat sheet?
I use Save the Cat religiously. It is now the way my brain thinks of stories.
I do that too. So if people aren't familiar with that, it's essentially an Excel spreadsheet. And the whole idea of a beat sheet is that you kind of need to be aware of where the big beats of your story are. So, you know, every story needs an inciting incident. It needs rising action, the midpoint, falling action, the climax. These are all things that your reader just intuitively expects you to provide. And generally they happen at certain points. You know, you can definitely play with that, but it's a framework. And I think when you're writing a mystery, it can be very helpful, because you absolutely, you know, your climax is when everything needs to come together. So you have to figure out what the foundational steps are to get you there. So I start with that big piece of, okay, X is the end. And usually the middle is kind of like right when everybody's like, they've learned a lot of what they need to learn. They're marshaling their forces, you know, they're getting ready to be proactive instead of reactive. So, you know, you're putting them in more danger, you know, you're giving them more to do. But hopefully you're also confusing them even more, because that's too soon for people to know what's going on. So definitely I use beat sheets. I mean, the other thing I do is to try and make sure that every character has, if not a secret, has something that the protagonists don't know about them. And they have some kind of stake in what's happening, either positive or negative. So that can be woven in. With the mystery, you want everybody to be a little bit suspicious. So you got to figure out all your side characters, backstories, and motivations, and how can you use those to play with expectations.
I love that. I'm mentally taking notes, because it would be very strange if I started actually taking notes, but I'm going to write that down.
Next question is the inspiration for your world and how you went about creating the magic system.
So a lot of the inspiration in East Row is my home. It's where I grew up. It's the people in my community. Miss Leola, if you've read the book, is the blend of my two grandmothers. One is which is deceased. I named it after her. I named Miss Leola after my deceased grandmother, my mother's mother.
I love that.
And she's the personality of my father's mother, who's still here. And so a lot of the East Row world building came so easily to me because it's so my life. There are scenes in this book, several of them from my actual life. And so that part was easy. Now, jumping to the magical world, I try to think of the thing, like I tried to think of things that I loved about some of my favorite magical worlds that I've visited and kind of write down, what did I love about those things? I love societies that are very sort of polarized. I love dictators with secrets. Won't spoil anything, but I love, and then I love worlds that have a very clear disparity in social class. And I like to explore the history of like how it became that way. And the people sort of who are higher in the social class, like what is their sort of perspective on the world and their state of where they are and how they got there and sort of how do they look at other people, and then like exploring that from other caste systems. Like there was so much more I could have written in the world, but it's like, how did we, it was constantly a balance of like, how do I keep the pace going without getting bogged down with all the backstory? Because book one is so much about East Row. But that was mainly it. And then with the magic system, again, I wanted it to feel very easily understood. I wanted my magic and my world to be very grounded in the contemporary because I wanted to pull in that contemporary audience. And so I felt like the metaphor for magic being power was sort of the best way to go. And I love this idea of sort of the work of a person's hands and like kids thinking about magic being fused through their hands. And sort of like what that means, like even just the imagery of that power, that what are you going to do in your life? What is the work of your hands going to be? And even in my dedication, which I usually like to read at these things in case people don't have the book, I say, and for you, reader, there is an ember in you that's hungry to burn. That is your magic. Let it. And I think that my magic system really reflects that idea. Like, what is it that that is your magic? Lean into that and let it fuel you. So,
I love that. Okay. Next question. Thank you for putting such an important story into the world. Can I ask, what advice do you have for aspiring Black authors? In your experience and from the experience of your peers, is it difficult to get a book deal if Black stories are not about Black trauma, like police brutality, racism, prejudice, etc.?
I think it has been. I think it has been difficult, more difficult. I think that is changing. I'm cautiously optimistic that will continue to change. And I guess my advice would be just remember tenacity is your greatest weapon. So the one thing they can't take from you is your story. So you have to write from a place of understanding that your story is important, not because someone else says it's important, but because you know it's important. And understand too, when a publisher or like an editor or an agent pass on your story, that is not a reflection of your story's worth or your worth as a writer. I struggled with that hugely when I was querying. I would sit and query, like even after Div Pit, Karen, I queried all these agents. Within 2 days, I had like 3 rejections. And I mean, it gutted me. And that was the first 3. There were many, there were numerous. So understand that, like, I guess what I would say to any writer, like watching this story unfold and like you see my name on the New York Times bestseller list. And I want you to understand, I got tons of rejections, tons of rejections on sub from editors and from agents. And like, that's part of the process. So learning to understand that rejection is one, not a rejection of you, not a rejection of your story's worth, and not even a rejection of your story's viability. Because if one editor or agent says, you know, I just don't think this is going to work for me, et cetera, or it's not a good fit, or I can't connect, that is their opinion. And I mean, they're just one person, you know, they're a human, if you're human. So I think that's a great challenge, especially in those querying trenches, is to remember that these are stop signs, not brick walls. And I know that's easier said than done, because I've sat with that. I have cried. I have not slept some nights over rejections. Like, understand that it's what you do with that and how you keep moving that makes the difference. And it's a great time to really get your work out there and start writing, because I'm seeing changes. I'm seeing lots of books acquired. There's been so many announcements about beautiful Black books coming out that are not centering trauma. And I am very hopeful that that will continue. So
optimistic.
Yes.
Next question is putting me on the spot. They want to know if I'm Team Jamal or Team Julius.
My student is very insistent about this question. So, yes.
I'm going to tell you, now I'm bringing my own writerly biases here, but I am Team Julius, because I am all about the history. I am all about the childhood. Like, you know, we had a little something and then life got in the way, but it's still there. So yeah, which is not to say I don't have fondness for Jamal, but I am Team Julius.
You and Tiffany Jackson, she declared her loyalties yesterday. I'm not playing refuse. It was like, I am not getting caught up between these two loads. She's reserving judgment until book 2.
So me and Tiffany are gonna like have T-shirts. When book 2 comes out, we're gonna be sitting there in the audience, and we're gonna have some questions for you if things don't go the way we want. So
I love them both. Funny enough, when I was writing this book, I had this conversation with my editor, and I asked, I was like, who do you ship? You know, Julius or Jamal? And because I don't like readers to know where I stand, I won't say, but I will say my editor and I were actually rooting for the different love interests, which I thought brought great balance to the story.
Yes. Yeah. Well, it's good because it is a balanced triangle. You know, it's not always. Sometimes there's a clear favorite, someone that's very obviously better for the protagonist. Not in this case. So, you know, I'll accept it if it doesn't go my way. I think, you know, she'll be okay.
You're like, Jamal's acceptable. Book 2, the love triangle, is a lot bigger. The love triangle plays a bigger role in the story.
Does it?
So for all of my love triangle fans, you are in for a time in the sequel.
Nice. And that is coming out. I know this just came out, but is it next, like around the same time next year?
It should be.
Okay, excellent. Okay, this is an awesome question. Please tell JL Mom is here and said hi.
Hi, Mom.
Your mom would like to know, when did you know you wanted to write? At what age?
So funny. Oh my gosh, Mom. Okay. You called me and asked me this. I'm just kidding. When did I know I wanted to write? You know, and my mom knows this, obviously. She just wants me to tell y'all. So I used to write in my journal a lot, in diaries a lot. I never saw writing as like a pursuable career. And I think that is an issue of representation. Like, I didn't see myself in a lot of the books that I read. And so I just assumed it was not something that people that looked like me and I realized how like that dense that sounds now, but literally like as a child, when you're reading these books, you're like, oh, this is something someone else does for me. Yeah. Like, we do it for us, and we get the books from the library, like, we don't do this. And so I pursued medicine in college. I was a pre-med major, and then I got to organic chemistry and realized I actually didn't want to fail out of college. So I switched to journalism, and it came so natural to me. I had a minor in PR and rhetoric and writing. And I started to blog just because I just again, writing is always processing for me. So I would go to process emotions, the latest breakup, you know, whatever it was. That's where I would do it. And then it literally was not until I had a story on my mind that would not let me sleep. Literally, I was waking up, for probably 4 or 5 months in the middle of the night with these scenes in my head. And this was not Wings of Ebony. This is something else. And I was like, I don't know why. Like, I need to go. Like, I have young children. I need sleep. Like, they're robbing me of it as it is. Like, I need to be able to rest. So I was like, what if I just let the words out? And that's when I started to write, just to get it out of my head. It didn't dawn on me that I could actually try and write a book, honestly, until I joined Twitter and I realized, wait, these are just like everyday people.
Right. Yeah.
And then I was like, you're Martin and The Hate U Give and like Tiffany Jackson's books and Danielle Clay. And I really started to think about it. And I was like, can I do this? And so I took those pieces of a story that I had written down to sleep. And I was like, let me try to make this into a book. And that was actually my first book. I finished it in a month. It was 198K. It's a hot month. Well, the notes that I'd kept it added up to about 40,000 words. Now, and not anything cohesive, really. They were just like pieces and parts of things. But when I sat down with that 40, I was like, let me keep going again. Pantser, hot mess. And I wrote another 58K that month. And I sent it to one of my Twitter friends, Jessica, who I think is listening. And she read it, and she had been writing longer than me. And so she was just like, I love this girl. So I'm going to gently give her, 1,000 line edits and let her know. Like, she was so sweet. But it was after I finished that book that I said, you know what? Like, I want to do this. And it wasn't until that moment. And from that moment, like, Rue is who I wrote.
Yeah. I love that. And I think it's so, I also knew nothing about writing before joining social media, like learned on the go type of thing. And I think for all those aspiring readers who are watching, one of the things that has struck me, and I've been in the writing community now for like 5 years, is that people really do, they progress. You see them as like bright, eager newbies like I was once, knows nothing, doing all sorts of like tactical errors with your writing, but everybody learns, and the people who stick with it, it's really something to see how they progress and often get deals. It doesn't always happen as fast as it should, for sure. And some people it just takes longer for lots of reasons, but everybody progresses if they stay with it and if they take feedback. I think those are like the two big things to really get where you want to be.
That's it. I could not agree more.
And we are like almost up on time, but let's take like one more question. And that is, how do you come up with your story endings, and how do you want people to feel when they're done?
That's an interesting question because I'm very intentional with the endings of my books. And I know generally what I want them to be. But for me, it's kind of like, this is going to sound weird. It's kind of like when you meet somebody and they smell good, right? It's like, ooh, they smell good. Like, you remember that. So for me, the end of a book is an emotion. It's a feeling. I want you to feel the weight of the book when you close it. And so for me, crafting the end of a story is often something I go back to many times, and it's purely driven by how do I want the reader to feel. Like, if my book doesn't make me gush tears or like sit still and stare out the window for several moments, then I didn't like write it right. So for me, the end of the story is all about that lingering feeling at the end. Because I think if you can write a book that readers feel something at the end, it makes them want to tell someone, and it makes them want to have a copy so they can read it again.
Yes. Exactly. And this was a very emotional ending to this book. It was like heartfelt, and it stays with you, and it makes you very eager for book 2. So I will be expecting that in my inbox when you have it.
Happily.
Me and my Team Julius t-shirt will be just seeing what's up.
There will be Team Julius and Team Jamal swag for book 2 because it is so central. So you will definitely get some of the Julius swag. You and Tiffany. Danielle won't get anything because she won't choose. So
she won't choose. Well, that's her problem. She gets no cool swag. All right. Well, everyone, this audience was fantastic. I'm so happy everyone came out to celebrate this wonderful book, and I had such a great time chatting with you.
Thank you so much, Karen. This was a joy. I appreciate it so much.
Thank you both. This is a really wonderful conversation, and thank you to Auburn Avenue Research Library. Thank you to everyone in the chat. You guys asked such smart, good questions. I can tell that there are a lot of up and coming writers in this virtual room. So I look forward to y'all writing books and coming on here and sharing them with us. So I have 2 more things I want to tell you, which is we will be repackaging this with captions and putting it live on YouTube in a couple days. So be on the lookout for that. And we will be sending out an announcement to one lucky winner of this. Do you want to hold up the cuff one more time?
So cool.
Yes. So one lucky winner will be getting that. It's going to be drawn randomly from the folks who registered for tonight's event. You can buy Wings of Ebony via this teal button. You can also buy all of Karen's books from Karis. We would love to send those out to you as well. And finally, we are primarily individually donor sponsored. We're a nonprofit. And so if you have $5, $10 that you feel able to share at this time, we really appreciate all of the support. We are a feminist bookstore, and we do a lot of social justice work outside of just author events. So if that's something that you have the capacity to do, we really appreciate it. If not, we are just really glad that you're physically, here with us and able to share this evening. So JL, thank you. Congratulations. We are so excited for your success. And we can't wait for book 2.
Thank you so much. This meant the world to me. I appreciate you so much. I will follow up with an email gushing about how much. And Karen, it was so good to see you. I appreciate you so much.
You too. It was a blast. I will see you on Twitter.
Yes.
Bye, everyone.
Stay safe, everybody.